Our next speaker is Dr. Mark VanGessel, who will be giving us a local farmer perspective on resistance and integrated weed management.
BJ went through a number of different strategies and another number of different tactics that are available and could be used. And what we wanted to do with this next session was to talk to some growers that we've worked with over the past that we know have had herbicide-resistant weeds and have come up with some of the systems that fit their farm the best, and show how they're taking some of the individual tactics and meld them in together in a more comprehensive approach.
I farm west of Felton, Delaware, right in the middle of Delaware, next to the Maryland line. I grow soybeans and corn on about 100 acres. I also own and operate a crop consulting business as an independent agronomist, and work in Kent County and a little bit in Sussex County. The herbicide-resistant weeds on my farm include Palmer Amaranth and marestail. And I would say those are probably the two most common that I run into in my consulting business, with the addition of some resistant common ragweed as well. One of the things I did was to plant a cover crop rye before the full season beans, and in rotation with a corn crop. I would spread the rye in the fall after the corn was harvested, work that in, and then allow that rye to get some size in the spring to provide some cover. And I felt like that that probably helped a little bit as far as providing competition and keeping some of those marestail from emerging, or at least getting big. I've also, when I'm burning down that rye, including a effective burn down herbicide for marestail, so like a 2,4-D or a dicamba, at a pretty strong rate. And then if I do have escapes, I'm cleaning those up at planting. I'm using or at least try to use a 3-pass program for soybeans. The first pass being the burn down of the cover crop, the second pass being, at planting to clean up any of those escaped marestail and not allowing them to get, real tall. And then I'll come back with a post application. And I have, where we've had major escapes, I've gone out and actually pulled marestail before. That's not something, that's kind of last resort, but I have done it. So a few years ago, I found a few plants, and I pulled them. Was the first thing I did. And then the next year, knowing that I had Palmer, the potential to have Palmer again, I implemented a 3-pass herbicide program for both crops, corn and soybeans. Like in marestail, I'm burning down to terminate a cover crop in beans, or in corn, I'm burning down any existing vegetation early, and then coming back at planting with a pre-emergence herbicide to clean up escapes, mainly for the marestail, something like bicep, and then coming back with a post-emergence application using multiple modes of action, effective herbicides, and adding additional residual to that herbicide. So in corn, that might be 3 or 4 different herbicides post, and then timing it to where the Palmer was small, and that's worked really well. Also, I should have mentioned that I'm rotating my crops back and forth every year, so I do corn, beans. I'm trying not to do the corn on corn or beans after beans, so I think that helps too, because I'm able to rotate my herbicides. And then I scout, and if I see any, I pull them. I haven't implemented a cover crop before the corn so much, but before the beans, again, I'll still have that rye cover crop there, allowing it to get some size. And I would consider that part of the program for soybeans as well. So with the marestail, I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm doing there. I feel like we're doing okay. In the corn, I think I might actually increase the rates of some of the herbicides and possibly include another herbicide at post-emergence application. I didn't see any palmer this year. So I feel like I am getting good control of the palmer with those steps that I took. And I've seen that in other fields as well. I'll put it that way, in fields that had maybe heavier infestations than what I had here. And I would say that's the first step, is just to, take it seriously and adopt that no tolerance policy for, those resistant weeds on your farm. So that means taking some additional steps in order to control that. It's going to be an additional cost, but it'll be worth it in the long run. So some things that I would say, like the first thing I would say is, all right, you found them. Did you run them through the combine? Or did you pull them? And if you ran them through the combine, the first thing you need to go do is go clean the combine. If you haven't done it already, here's some things you can do to go clean out that combine, not just from the outside, but from the inside too. You need to get the weed seed out of that combine before you start harvesting next year, to stop the spread right now. Then I would suggest that they implement, a 3-pass herbicide program. If they're doing corn and soybeans, that would be my, probably one of the more important pieces of it all. Get a copy of that Mid-Atlantic Weed Management Guide and look at the effective herbicides. And if you don't want to do that, work with somebody who does have the knowledge of that, and find, scout your fields, or find somebody to do it for you to help time those post-emergence application. Because once that palmer gets big, you're not going to kill it. So you really need to be spraying when they're small, and taking them out and killing them. So, herbicides at planting help to prevent it, but if it does come up, that well-timed post-emergence application is the best bet. So after that, you're going to be pulling. I would also suggest, if you do have palmer escapes, go pull them. Riding by those fields where you see 1 or 2 plants, it's just, you just go out there and pull them, because it'll save it's a little bit of work at the time, but it's just so much seed in each one of those plants, and it just blows up over time. So it starts with 1 or 2 plants, and then the next year you're infested. So.
We're H&J Wright Family Farms here in Delmar, Delaware. I'm here with my dad. We grow about 500 acres, give or take, corn, soybeans, a little bit of barley and wheat, and then we also do some vegetables, butternut squash, watermelons, and a few fresh market cucumbers.
You have some livestock animals?
We do a few turkeys, fresh turkeys for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Well, a couple of years ago we had marestail pretty good, but that's seemed to settle down a little bit. But now it's pretty much Palmer Amaranth. It's encroaching everywhere, every field. He seems like more so from I think neighboring fields, but you can't really point fingers. But yeah, Palmer's definitely the biggest obstacle right now by far, I'd say. I suspect that is obviously basically in soybeans, Roundup. It just crop rotation is the biggest thing. We do soybeans. I mean, it won't be every, probably 3 or 4 years, I'd say, because we do rotate the vegetables and then corn and then barley and wheat. So that and moldboard plowing. We used to do that before wheat, which we've gotten away from that a little bit now, but it seemed to make a big difference for marestail. Anywhere you mow or plow, there's no marestail. No-till seemed to always show up. So I think we came back with a little bit of 2,4-D, I think, over top. Okay. And that seemed to wipe them out pretty much. Well, we don't really watch the cover. Like if we're going full season beans, is that what you're talking about?
Right, yeah.
It's more so the weeds inside that are more of a factor for us when we spray it. But you see the marestail is the biggest thing in germinating in the spring there. If it gets, above 4 inches pretty much, we're spraying it. Otherwise, the results on it aren't, you're going to be very scattered. I mean, you get the smaller marestail are usually pretty easy to control. Once it gets, 4 or 6 inches, then it's a lot harder. Everybody knows that. So
Right. So you're scouting and spraying it timely.
Right. Oh yeah, that's the biggest thing, the weed size. Cover crop, I mean, it's going to die off one way or the other.
Yeah.
I'd say about 3-4 years ago, never had it. Weirdest thing, we get a little bit of chicken manure we buy, just spread on the corn ground. And I guess a little bit came in one load. All it was one section of field, length of the field by about 30 feet, width of the spreader pretty much, and it was just eat up with it. Don't know where it came from. Like I say, that's the only thing we could figure, and it was everywhere in there. We started going through, pulling out by hand, just getting seed out of it. There was no way time, and it just wasn't possible. So we just went in, ran the combine through it, best we could do, and we came back, put barley in it, moldboard plowed it. advice of Mark. So it worked out really well. Next year, we didn't see any. I was shocked. I mean, we planted Liberty Link beans just in case, but moldboard plow, distant planted the barley, soybeans after, didn't show up at all. And it was, I don't know what the density was, but it was everywhere in that 30 foot by whatever it was, 1,000 foot range.
Mm-hmm.
So
have you had any since then?
There, no. I mean, a little bit right on the border of the field where we don't, didn't get tilled up or sprayed the best. But right in the middle of the field there, it has not been there. I'm very happy with the results there. I mean, it's a mess. We have had some isolated spots now. That was the one year. Then after that year, it just seems to get progressively worse just because the weed seed is absurd how much it produces, what, for 500,000 or something, right?
Right, yeah.
And I know we've seen it here, spots here or there, just one pop up, anywhere that happens, we just try to go rip it out before the seed starts and try to keep on top of the best we can. But like you say, the pressure just seems to be getting worse and worse. Well, if we know, like we have a couple fields, a couple miles down the road here, we know the neighbors have it pretty good. So we know next year it's going to be there pretty much. So, I mean, corn, there's always the, come back with Roundup Natrazine over the top. But if we're going to plant barley or wheat there and follow with beans, we'd be sure to plant Liberty Length just so we have another option. Absolutely. I mean, corn, all our corn ground is cover crop now just for minimize nutrient loss and, of course, help weed suppression. Beans, we do a little bit, but it's a little harder because later in the season. So, well, I mean, depending on the size of the patch, if it's just 4 or 5, even 20 or 30 plants, I would say go in there and rip them out, load them up just to get the weed seed out of there. Just because, like I say, the weed seed, it seems like is absurd on those things. If it's something you can't do, like we had in the chicken manure, where there's no way to rip them all out, you got to do what you do. Just run right on through them, and then, because the seed's going to be there no matter what, and then just plant accordingly next year, cover crop over winter, and then I would say go with some Liberty Link soybeans if you're doing that next year, or just be prepared for it with corn. I mean, it's, like I say, it's just been here within the last 3 or 4 years, kind of widespread more so. So I'd say it's a little early to tell that. I'm not sure, but in theory, I guess it should be. Mm-hmm. The cover crop should help some. I would say corn, herbicide, or corn, soybeans, no matter what, always use pre-emergent herbicide. Don't just rely on Roundup or don't just rely on Liberty. Always put something there to start off with. That's your best bet, I'd say.
Our farm is pretty much what the residual of the family farm that we have about 85 fall calving brood cows, and grow the hay and rotationally graze those. Use some of the cropland for hay production, and our main crop would be soybeans. There for a while we were using wheat on a third of would try to plant a third of the acres to wheat every year as kind of a cash cover crop. For the last 5 or 6 years, we haven't done that, and we've gone completely to planting rye or triticale, some wheat as a cover crop that we burn down. From a weed standpoint, we've had trouble with palmer amaranth. We do have some Roundup resistant ragweed in some of the fields, and we have dealt in several of the fields with some glyphosate resistant marestail. That doesn't seem to be as big a problem now as we've incorporated cover crops onto all the land, especially trying to get a burn down in front of the cover crops too, I think has helped with that. We don't succeed on every acre every year in doing that, but that's the goal when we start out, is to burn that down before we plant the cover crop after the bean harvest. We have noticed since we've started trying to incorporate cover crops in, that just like the research has shown, that having cover on the land, suppresses palmer germination in skips or or places where we misplanted cover crop, it's easily evident that you get a lot more weed, you get a lot earlier and more weeds coming up where you don't have a good cover crop. More detail on what our herbicide programs have been. We generally start out with a burn down of Roundup plus pine or 2,4-D and a residual. The last couple of years we've used N-Vibe as our residual. Have been using where I couldn't use Ingenia or Extendamax over the top with using Warren Ultra, which is the chemical inflex star plus your residual Warren. And we get, if you can get that time right, you do pretty good. Part timing it, I'm never timed right. So my control has been worse in those situations than with the Ingenia plus Warren. I'm a real big believer in that second residual that I've done parts of fields both ways, and you could really see the benefit of having that residual and yet that over the top. This year, we're planning to go ahead and switch to the Extendaflex beans so we can use Liberty in our spots where can't use the Ingenia or don't feel comfortable using it. And we'll plan to run a residual in all of those over the top. Some of my problem fields, I think I'm gonna go to just planning on doing 2 burn downs, and probably to cheapen that up, I'll probably just, when I burn the cover down, just use something like Valor and then come back with Gamoxone Dual in front of plan, and then probably continue to use Warrant or something over the top for the post. It's a whole lot easier to kill the pigweed if you kill him before it's soybeans out there, I think. So get out of the truck and pull them up.
So we had 3 different, first of all, I want to thank 3 farmers who agreed to videotape for this. I thought brought a different perspective. I also want to thank Claudio Rubione for producing our videos there. If we were all in person, we would have a little bit of a discussion on what we heard there. But a couple of things that kind of struck me as we put these videos together and listened to them is, no one set of strategies was consistent across the 3 farms. Everyone has a different program and a different group of tactics that they're implementing that fits in with their overall production scheme. That they are finding things that work for them. And while a lot of times the discussion, a lot of times when we start to discuss weed control, it tends to shift towards herbicides. But if you listen, every one of those farmers was also bringing in some of these non-chemical strategies and emphasizing the importance for them. And we can't take this intensive strategy across all species that we have in the field. We have multiple species in any given field, but they're targeting the most troublesome species for them. And one of the messages that came across the 3 of them was the emphasis on seed production and stopping that seed production, and where there may be a few escapes, pulling them out so they don't contribute back to the seed bank. All real important considerations that all 3 of them made.
We did want to acknowledge support for this project, particularly the Maryland Soybean Board, as well as throughout the Mid-Atlantic. University of Delaware, Virginia Cooperative Extension, University of Maryland.